welcome back. And Connor, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Aram. Glad to be here.
Dude, it is so wild to be talking to you as we're both like well into our professional career, because of course we've known each other for 20 years.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking about that too. I was like, I've known you for, I think probably since I was like 15.
Yeah, that's wild. That's totally wild, which is cool. Like it's cool to be able to maintain a relationship and see where people are like as they're older. And since we're here to talk about leadership and business and being a professional, let's get into it. So why don't you, for the uninitiated, the audience is going to know about you a bit professionally, but why don't you just tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name's Connor Spencer. I'm a sports performance nutritionist. I'm currently the performance nutritionist for the Los Angeles Football Club, which is a soccer team here in LA. I also run and operate Fuel Lab Sports Nutrition, which is my own sports nutrition consultancy. And there I work with just athletes of all types from various different sports, just trying to help those athletes dial in their own nutrition strategy.
Yeah. It's a fascinating area to be involved in. How did you even go down this path?
I think it started out of a selfishly, actually, when I was, as I was in my, let's say, early 20s, I got into competitive cycling. Mm-hmm. Largely thanks to a previous guest on your show, Ross Trineri, who just started talking to me nonstop about cycling. I was like, you got to ride. And went on a couple of rides with him and it hooked me. And then I got into the competition side of it. And it was always like, how can I be better? I'm training, I'm working hard. Am I focusing though on my nutrition? And nutrition was sort of a tool that then allowed me to, I think, become a better athlete and perform better. And that's how then I got involved and sort of came into this idea of, there's actually nutrition for sports, and what you eat and when you eat and how much you eat can have an impact on your performance and your recovery and all of these things that matter when you're training day after day after day.
So previous to educating yourself because you wanted to be a better athlete, what were you doing? Like, what was your focus professionally?
My focus professionally was trying to become a professional bike racer.
Okay. So how about even before that, like before you even got into cycling, what were you doing?
Working at sneaker stores.
Right. So it's like you just kind of found your thing.
Yeah. It was moving from working at sneaker stores, then working at bike shops. And it was sort of like the cycling and the bike shop thing sort of happened at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then for about, what would that have been? Many years spent working in bike shops trying to see if I could go pro. Mm-hmm. And then that ended up not working out.
Yeah. Do you mind if we go even further back?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So you grew up in the Bay Area, is that right?
Yeah.
And tell us about finding like punk and hardcore.
Yeah. I mean, this was something that I want to say it probably started when I was as young as like in second and third grade, when Green Day was like really big on MTV. So it was sort of like, okay, so you got like Green Day Dookie, and you're like, okay, like this is punk. This is great. And then that, like, I was into skateboarding when I was really young too. So watching skate videos, and then you're like, oh, what's this band? And you find out, it's Bad Religion. And you start listening to Bad Religion. And I had an older sister, who's about 4 years older than me, who was also into sort of like punk. And we had this alternative radio station in the Bay Area called Live 105, which I'm sure, I don't even know if it still exists anymore, but I'm sure it's a far cry from, what it was back then, but she was sort of a big influence in me, I think, as I got a little bit older, as I moved like out of like being like a real child into being like, I guess, a younger teenager. Mm-hmm. But I think where hardcore really came in, and I would say more like, I mean, still well-known hardcore bands, but maybe not like stuff that's being played on MTV, was probably when I was in seventh grade. and I was in, and I remember this day like so clearly. But I was in the back seat of her boyfriend's car at the time. She was in high school, and I was in 7th grade.
And this is your sister.
This is my sister. Yeah. So my sister's boyfriend's car. We were driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, and Can't Close My Eyes from Youth of Today came on, and I was like, "What is this?" Like, because all up I knew until that point was like AFI. And like a lot of like the Nitro Records bands that I'd heard on like skate videos, which, like was fun stuff, like, and is still like good. But man, hearing that I was like, what, like that was something that completely, it just like, that like changed my life. Like hearing that album, and I was like, this is incredible. This is the thing that I've been looking for. And there it was.
So for the uninitiated, and you know this because we've talked about it, we got a lot of people who come from different lifestyles to the podcast. So some people are corporate people, some people come from punk, like all sorts of different backgrounds. So for people who wouldn't know this, the uninitiated, and Connor, I'm going to say this for you because I don't think you'd say it yourself. Lights Out was the band that Connor fronted for many years, and was one of, and I still think to this day, the coolest, most standout bands from that area, of an area that has like such an incredible legacy of punk and hardcore. For me, a band that I think like just is always like a really important band, and I think really captured a time and a place super well. If we think about Lights Out, up into that point, was there anything that really gave you as much of a focus as you found when you were playing in hardcore bands? Like, did you ever do anything before that you really poured yourself into?
No, not really. I mean, I think like growing up, I was skateboarding, but that wasn't like, and that was, focused on skateboarding, loved skateboarding. But you're so young that it's like, at least for me, when you're like 9, 10 years old, like 11 years old, it's like, how focused can you like actually be, and how much like action can you take on something? I mean, I know there's like, I'm sure some kids are like doing lots of things at that age now. But it wasn't really until high school when then we started Lights Out, that was like, oh, this is where you have a little bit more autonomy as just being like a younger teenager. And you just develop this whole entire community around going to shows every weekend, sometimes during the week. And then you have your band, and that's just like, that's it. That's your life pretty much. And that's how it was for me. And nothing had really been like that up until that point.
So you do Lights Out, and again, you put out great records, make a big impact, do like national tours. I believe, did you tour Europe?
We did. Yeah, we did a European tour in 2005.
All right. Tour Europe. And then it seems like suddenly music closes off for you. And I know you did more afterwards, but like not again on that level. So, and then I kind of lost track of you until you went into cycling. So when you closed off that chapter of music, and I don't want to say close like that you'll never play music again, but when it stopped being your main focus, what replaced that? Like, where did you put that energy?
Yeah, then that energy developed into cycling. Mm-hmm. So then it went from driving home from Sacramento at 2 a.m. To now going to bed at 9 a.m. and waking up at 6 a.m. every day to go ride before work, and then go to races in like the middle of nowhere of California.
Okay. So was that energy, that like that desire to pour yourself into something, was that already in you, or is that something that developed as a result of being involved in punk and hardcore?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I can focus really well on like one thing at a time, mm-hmm. So like, and it's funny, you can kind of think about it, because it almost feels like there's sort of been like I've lived like 3 lives, mm-hmm. It was like yeah, it was like, okay, punk and hardcore. And this is what I do. And this is who I am.
Yeah.
Then it turned into cycling, and it was like, I'm a bike racer, and this is what I do. And this is who I am.
Yeah.
And now it's like, now I'm a sports nutritionist.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's just like on my lack of attention, that I can only really focus on one thing at a time, or what, but it was like, I think what I learned from Lights Out, and my experience with Lights Out, was it was like, if you want something and you work hard at it, you'll be able to accomplish what you wanted. And what I wanted as a result of starting Lights Out was, I want to tour the US and I want to tour Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to do those things. It wasn't about like playing huge, gigantic shows or like making money or anything like that. It was just like, I just want these experiences with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to do that, and it was incredible. So then it was like, okay, I found something else that I really liked, which also had a huge social element to it too. Now, if I start to think about it, and it's like, okay, now I want to have all these experiences with some of the same friends and some new friends too.
Yeah, I distinctly remember thinking, and thank you for saying the community part of it, because when I was aware that you were so involved in cycling, it stood out to me. I was like, oh, like that makes sense, because Connor grew up in punk, and there's that whole community. You're like within group, and you're doing something together, and it sounds like you took that feeling you had from punk and hardcore, and you replicated following something you really care about, but you wanted something that had like a big culture that was around it as well. Yeah,
and I mean, it's interesting that you frame it that way, because it's not something that you really think about unless you reflect on it, because you just get kind of caught up in the moment. But yeah, you have, just like you said, there's the entire culture of punk and hardcore. And then for better or for worse, there's the whole like cycling culture too. Yeah. Right. And so it's, it is interesting to see that connection.
Yeah. I also want to take a minute to shout out Sean, Youngblood Records. You rule, man.
Yeah. What's up, Sean?
Great person, great record label, and a big part of Lights Out. And also, just like, I love what you said. It's like, like I didn't really care about playing the big shows. I just want to do this thing with my friends. But you did play the big shows, and like Lights Out was like and still is a very well remembered. Like I think your reunion shows prove that. Like really has a strong legacy. But that chapter closes, and you go into cycling. Why weren't you able to become a professional cyclist?
I probably wasn't good enough. Like it just like you get to a level. So there's in amateur cycling in the US, you have different categories. Like category 5 is like, you're a brand new rider and you like, are just starting to think about racing. And then it goes up to category 1, where you're like you're still an amateur, but you have an opportunity to race with, there's certain races where they sort of mix like Cat 1s and pros together. So I got up to Cat 1 and raced Cat 1 for about 5 years. Is that right? Yeah, I think about 5 years, with a couple years of, or about like 1.5 years of just being like injured the entire year. And I found cycling rather late, like in my early 20s. And most guys who are pro are racing when they're like 8 or 9 years old. And then they end up on national teams when they're under 18, national teams when they're under 23s, and then kind of development teams, and then feed them sort of into the pro circuit. There's very few examples of guys who find cycling late, then end up making a career out of it. Right. I think I found early success in cycling. So I was like, oh, well, I'm like, this is a piece of cake. Like, let's just keep going. You get up to that level where it's like, yeah, like a lot of other people worked really hard to get up to that Cat 1 level. And then you're like, oh, this is where people start just like if you can't hang and you can't like dedicate it felt like almost like my entire life to it, because I tried racing after then sort of like saying, okay, like I can't just work to sustain my cycling ambitions. Now I have to actually work to try to make a career and figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And you just can't fake it at that level. And yeah, I just think I was decent, but I wasn't great. I think I just had so much fun doing it that I was like, I love this. Like, I want this to be my job. Yeah. So probably a bit delusional maybe, but we had a good time.
Hey man, like, I think like there's a level of success where, I don't know if delusional is the term I'd use, but there's a level of success where you're like, you're not even thinking of failing. You're like, yeah, of course I'm going to do this, until you get to a point where you just can't. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll go do something else then. But let's hit that point. Like, so when you first started learning about sports nutrition, it was just to help yourself out to become more competitive. Is that right? When did it start to eclipse your desire to be a cyclist, or was it just like a backup plan when you realized you weren't going to make it?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I was at a U.S. cycling and regional development camp in Northern California, it's either probably like, it would have been like 2008, maybe 2009. And as part of that camp, we had a sports nutritionist come talk to us, and hearing her speak, like, I was already interested in nutrition, like how it could impact me. But then hearing her speak, I was like, oh, she sounds like she has a really cool job. So I was like, I just kind of put that in my pocket as something that like, oh, this is kind of neat, And then would have been like 3 years later, I sent her an email sort of, and I was like, hey, how do I do what you do? And then, so she like gave me some background and some tips. And then, then it was another like probably 5 years later where I sent her an email again. And I was like, hey, I'm moving to the UK and I'm doing what you told me to do. Like, I'm going to go get my master's. And I think it was just sort of, it was almost like a natural transition through luck of having an opportunity to sort of switch careers that involved cycling, but also involved a bit of physiology and a bit of nutrition as well. So I think that that job that I had really was like a perfect shift to move from athlete to practitioner.
Did you make a distinct decision like, okay, it's time to wrap up trying to be an athlete? Like, I'm going to end this and pivot?
I don't think it was so like, I'm done. It was more like, I'm going to put this on hold and focus on something else, thinking that like, oh, maybe I'll come back to it.
Kind of like when you did your second band after Lights Out.
Yeah, kind of like, it was like, but it's just, there's, again, the level of time and effort that it takes to be like as fit as I once was. It's like, I don't feel like I have that time now. And I didn't have that time back then as a point when I was like, okay, now I'm focusing on other priorities. And I think it's okay because it's your priorities shift.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't feel like you're losing out. It's just like you're gaining something new, and something else is like something else, like your past was there and it happened and it was great, but we don't have to try to like live in that.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. And also, everything doesn't have to relate to being a punk band. I know I keep poking at it, but like, it's just because like I see these natural connections, but like you said something, and I hate to do this. I'm going to make a reference to punk though. Like, so let's say someone plays in their like one big band, or they have a couple bands, but that kind of like, you're constantly trying to like bring that forward with you. And like something I always like kind of recoil at is the person who always like, they play in a band, but they want their band that they're in now to be on the same level or regarded in the same kind of stratosphere as things they've done before. It's like, listen, if you're going to do a band now and your like quote unquote big band was like 10 years ago, you should be totally willing to play a show that has 2 people at it and be like totally cool with it. Cause that's the gig. Like the gig is like constant rebuild. I don't care what size band you played in. If you're going to play in a band now and you can't play that small show and open for other bands, you probably shouldn't be playing shows. So when we're thinking about, when you're started to shift into the world of sports nutrition and you're like, yeah, like I just thought like maybe I'd come back to it. I did want to ask, like, I was going to ask about the impact on your mental health. Like, did you feel you were giving something up? But I love how you framed it as like, well, no, I actually felt like I was gaining something and I was going down this path. Was there ever any moment of like sense of loss about the path of becoming a professional athlete? Or was it just like full speed ahead into this new direction?
No, I think there definitely was some feeling of loss because I spent, I spent, almost like 10 years, like just so like focused on this thing. And that was like, again, for better or for worse, like sort of like wrapping your identity around it, it was like everything whenever you'd go and like see family, oh, are you riding? Are you cycling? Are you still, that's like your whole entire friend group, or like not entire friend group, but so many of your friends are like wrapped up in the same thing. So then when you're like, I'm not going to do this anymore, then yeah, there is like a sense of like a little bit of like a identity crisis sort of thing of like, I was a bike racer. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, but I'm not that anymore. Yeah. So like, now what am I? And then it's sort of like, oh, I'm just Connor. Like, it's fine. Like, yes, get over it. You know what I mean? Like that's, and I mean, that's sort of like the same thing that I was sort of talking about like, just stop. Like, it's great to reflect, but don't try to live in the past of like, I was this. And it's more like I am doing this now. It's not even like part of the identity, but it's sort of trying to just like, yeah, that was great. This is now, let's make what's happening now like even better.
Yeah. So when did you put up the shingle? Like when were you like, okay, now I like what you said, I'm moving from athlete to practitioner. So when was the actual start of your like career in this field?
I think it was probably a bit of a transition. I'll say like 2015 was when I started working at a exercise physiology lab while also racing. And that was in 2015 was like my last, I think, like real full year of really like giving it everything I had in cycling. And then I continued to work at that exercise physiology lab from 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 before I moved to the UK to do my master's. So I think that was definitely like start of my career. In sort of like the last year that I was racing was like the first year that I started to like dive into the world of like exercise physiology and sports nutrition. And then, so I think that was the beginning, but then, when did my career like officially start? I don't know. Like, I mean, I think I would call that like that was sort of like when it started, but maybe it wasn't until, after finishing my master's and becoming the head of sports nutrition at a university here in California, where then it really felt like, okay, like now I've arrived, like kind of arrived. I don't know if that's really like the right word, but it's like, that's like, we're all buttoned up sort of from the education side. Like maybe we'll see in a couple of years if like PhD comes down the road, but like, I was like, okay, I went and got my master's. That's what I wanted to do. And now I have a job where I remember, this is a weird sense of coincidence, but I remember I knew I was moving and this job was advertised as a sports nutritionist at Cal State Northridge, which is a university like in the Valley in LA. And I was like, oh, that's the type of job I want to get when I finish my master's. And then no kidding, go do my master's, come home. I'm home for like 8 weeks trying to find a job. And then that job pops up again. And that's the job I end up getting.
Wow.
So it was like this weird, like little more than a year later, the job that I was like, this is the type of job I want. It's like, now this is the job I have. It's just wild.
Dude, I love it, man. All right. So I think like on the surface, most people could be like, oh yeah, I know what a sports nutritionist does. But really, like, just like any job, once you get behind it, it's like way more complex than that. So what does a sports nutritionist do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, what I can tell you what I do as a sports nutritionist.
Yeah.
My job is to understand the training, the physiological demands of training and competition, to then recommend how much food to eat, what to eat, and when to eat different meals throughout the day and different types of foods throughout the day, and in what quantities, to maximize the training adaptation response, maximize recovery when appropriate, and then ultimately maximize performance on game day.
How much psychology is involved in what you do? Meaning that, like, I can imagine that you tell people to do a lot of things, and you're going to have some people who are like, absolutely. And then you probably have some people who are like, meh, I'll do whatever I want.
Yeah, dude, it's all about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about building relationships and building trust. And that stuff takes time, right? Because if some new guy comes in and is like, hey, just do this. It's like, I don't know you. Why should I trust you? Who are you? I don't even know your last name, like whatever, And so there's absolutely an element of, psychology, and what you're also like trying to really change is behavior, because I think we all have knowledge of what we like should be doing, right? But how many of us like actually do it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that could be from like a wide variety of things, not just nutrition.
Yeah. I mean, like the easiest example I think that anyone can relate to is smoking. It's like straight up, smoking will kill you. Like, not even a question, no debate. Smoking will absolutely 110% kill you. And if you don't die directly from smoking, you'll very likely die from something related to smoking. It's horrible. People who smoke don't want to smoke. People who are related to people who smoke don't want them to smoke. Yet people smoke. And not only do people smoke, people start smoking. And the idea of change is such an interesting one, because like most people know what they shouldn't do, but very few people know what they should do. And especially with nutrition, like I have no idea, man. I'm like the worst. I've got a vegan diet. I'm the worst. I eat like absolute garbage constantly. And then I get these moments of like, well, I'm going to be like super healthy. And like, I have no idea how to do it. So I can only imagine when you're working with like high performing athletes, they might be even more difficult, because they probably have some theories, some ideas, some education, but they have like a hodgepodge that might make them more difficult to work with.
Yeah. I mean, you're dealing with athletes who are already at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, and maybe they got there without paying attention to nutrition in the first place.
Yeah.
So the question then is like, okay, well then if I'm already here, why should I take this on?
Yeah.
And I think that, I've experienced that with many athletes that I've worked with, not all of them, and not from I'm not just talking about the current club that I'm with, but just like at the college level, at the Division I level, at the professional level, even at the like, good, fast amateur level.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, I'm not really so sure about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to build that relationship or get that buy-in is something that takes time and is not a change that you're going to see overnight.
All right. Well, and to really nail you down on this, like your space is fascinating because like there's just so much information. There's tons of misinformation and kooky ideas and all that. So like, how do you approach, because what we're really talking about here is leading people, and leading people, especially that have had a level of success, which is hard, like really, really hard. So how do you approach it? How do you make gains with people like that when there's already been a level of success and when there's tons of misinformation out there? How do you actually build that kind of relationship?
Yeah, I think the thing that I always try to get across to someone is that I'm on their side, that I'm not there. One, as the nutritionist, I'm not the food police, but that we have a shared goal, and that goal is that individual's performance, right? Because if you're an athlete, you want to perform well, and any sort of recommendation that I make to someone is not so I feel good about myself and like my job. It's like anything that I recommend to you is going to be in line with the goal that you have set to be better. And so trying to consolidate a plan or or to cut out misinformation is to then like contextualize things that are specific to them. And again, just be like, I'm here to take you to where you want to go. And there may be some things that we haven't, or that you haven't looked at in regards to nutrition that I can help you navigate. So I think that shared goal and really focusing on the athlete themselves, and again, it's about them. It's not about me. That's how I try to approach it.
Can I share with you an idea that I have about people who, about that process of trying to win people over? So I think like people can be viewed either as a service provider or be viewed as an advisor. And a service provider does something specific for you, where an advisor can help you do a huge range. They give you like an elevated reality for it. And the way that I compare it is like, it's like utility versus ability. And I'm going to make an odd analogy. Service providers, and I don't think there's anything wrong. Like we need service providers who give you a specific thing. But the comparison I'd make is like a chair. I love a chair. I'm sitting in a chair right now. Like I need a chair for a good sit. I got to take a load off. It's fantastic. I can use a chair for a few things. I can use a chair to sit on. I can stand on a chair to reach things. I can like just wedge doors shut. I can do a few things. We can get creative, but there's not a lot that we can do with a chair. That would be utility. A chair is very specific. It's not going to give you a ton of different things you can do with it, but that thing that you can do with it is awesome. An advisor is like a computer, and a chair versus a computer. It's like, yeah, a chair is better for sitting, but a computer is better for doing literally every other thing that you need to do. And if I need to, I can just sit on the ground. A computer is going to increase my ability to do things that I already know how to do, but it's also going to give me an ability to do things that I have no idea how to do, or how to get in touch with people who could help me do it. An advisor gives you an elevated reality. They help you achieve your goals, and then goals you weren't even aware you needed. They would help you get to, like, if you had an expectation of a goal, they'd actually stretch that, and you're like, oh, I actually could get back up here. Where a service provider has like kind of a set menu, and that menu could be awesome. It could be great, but it's very specific. And what I'm hearing here is like, it's kind of like the battle between like, oh, here's your, diet that you got to do. And like, that's the utility service provider landscape versus like, I'm on your side. I'm going to help you get there. And like, let's see where we go together, partner with me effectively. Does that sound?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is it's trying to find the balance between the two, because the way that I practice is I practice a lot off of principle around like nutrition principles to follow, as opposed to this is your exact meal plan to follow. Because I find oftentimes people will ask for a meal plan and then they don't follow the meal plan.
Right.
Whereas the goal is to really like coach someone on like how to eat and how certain foods are very similar to one another and how some foods are very different to one another. So So they understand that, okay, on this type of day, whether it's a rest day or a match day or just a general training day, this is sort of what my plate should look like. And so the goal is to teach principles that then they can practice, rather than it's like just not learn anything.
Yeah. Totally.
So that's how I try to approach it. But yeah, it is, sometimes you have to be more just eat this.
Well, totally. And so there's got to be moments where you do have to show up like a service provider, or like you said, like maybe the food police, like whatever it be. But on the flip side, that to help people elevate isn't about giving them a set of rules. It's about like giving them a deeper understanding. And when I think about like leadership stuff, like the reason I try not to train people on like only on skills. Like this is how you do this is how you do that. I try and increase their understanding of who they are, who people are around them, what their environment that they're in. That's why they can make informed decisions on how to do things and why to do things. But it also increases the value of any skill I teach them. They understand why it matters and how they want to apply it. Just teaching people things, like anyone could read a book on having an effective diet, just like anyone could read a book about leadership. Being able to like apply that to your life or to your sport effectively means that you have to change the way you think, not just like the skill you have or the menu you follow.
Yeah. And I think just like you said, it's like, okay, this is why we're doing something. Mm-hmm. And some people care about the why, because like, well, why should I do this? Yeah. Okay, well, again, as we go back to, it's like, okay, well, there's a physiological reason why I'm recommending this. Yeah. And then it's like, that then is that bit in their head that says, okay, well, if I want this is what's happening in my body. Mm-hmm. And this is how I then can solve it or repair it or help my body recover by putting this on the plate, as opposed to I'm supposed to eat carbohydrate today. Right. No other reason than that's what the nutritionist told me to do.
Do you mind if I tell you about the stages of change model that I work with?
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
Okay, so it's called the trans-theoretical stages of change model. And so like that's just like fancy psychology speak for it's the theory of change that works across most theories of psychology. So trans-theoretical, but we can just call it stages of change. When I first started working in the business world, and I'd already been a therapist for a number of years, I saw these like articles. It's like, oh, the stages of change, or this model of change and that model of change, the 5 stages of change, the 10 stages. And as I was reading, I was like, this is like really like weird garbage. Like, why are people putting all this stuff out there? Like change is like, it's not that change is easy, but if you just follow this very simple model, it's like predictable. And it's all just about having the right kinds of conversations at the right stage. So stage 1 is pre-contemplation. It's when someone's not even thinking about the change that you think that they should make. And I always have like a type of a question that I think people that's behind each stage. So if I think of pre-contemplation, the question is why? Why would I change? Like, I'm not even thinking about change. Why would I change? Stage 2 is contemplation. And so now they're like, okay, well, like maybe I'd change. But the question there is what? Well, what would I change? Like, what would my life look like if I made this change? Stage 3 is preparation. And the question behind that is how? How would I do this? And then there's action. And again, that's another how question. But this is like a stage where there's a lot of feedback. Like, how am I doing? Like, I'm making this change. I need you to give me some feedback. How am I doing? That final stage is maintenance. So now the change has been made and we want to maintain. And for some people, there'd be like a relapse stage in there, but I won't get into that part of it. And the maintenance stage, the question would be is kind of 2 questions. One would be how, like, how do I keep this going? But the other question might be what's next? And when I think about change and the kind of changes that we try and get people to make, it's about entering in the right stage of change, like where's someone thinking? So if I think of like big organizations, they very often are going into the action phase. Or they might even go into the preparation phase. Like, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And then prepare yourself and they go into action. And it's like they miss pre-contemplation. They miss contemplation. whenever people are like resistant to change or really pushing back, you just probably started the conversation in the wrong place. And sometimes people can move through the stages of change super quickly. They're just with it. They're ready to change. Maybe they came into the conversation in contemplation already. But sometimes you got to really stay with people in that why, that pre-contemplation. Because if you're pitching someone a plan on something and they're like not even at contemplation yet, then it's just like you're just going to get mixed results over and over again. And that means influencing thinking by having the willingness to be in a conversation at the right stage.
Yeah, I think that, that's so important, because you can't, I think so much of it around in this role is it's about treating people as individuals and meeting them where they are. Because if some people, like I said, they're gonna buy right in, they're like, I'm down, let's go. And then other people will be like, not so sure about that. And if you only have one approach, and then you're like, well, why isn't this working? Like you said, you probably just started talking to them at the wrong stage, assuming that they were somewhere where maybe they're not.
Totally, man. So out of interest, and I know I'm going to ask you like I'm really sorry I have to ask you this question. Why is nutrition so freaking hard for our society? Like, it's like the worst, man.
Yeah. One sports scientist from the Netherlands has put it this way, and I think that he captures it really well, is that everybody eats, so everyone thinks they're a nutritionist. So everyone has, it's like, well, this is what worked for me. This is what worked for me. Why doesn't this work for you? Why doesn't, and it's hard. Nutrition's hard. It's hard to understand because a lot of the stuff isn't immediate. So you don't get immediate feedback all of the time. I mean, maybe sometimes you do. Like if you eat like, an entire Domino's pizza or something, you probably like won't feel that great. But like you wake up the next day and you're kind of okay.
Right.
And then you kind of forget how bad you felt, and you go and you do it again. Right.
Yeah.
And you can do that for like years and years and not have like, we talk about nutrition as trying to like optimize things, but it's pretty surprising to think about like how many people either by choice or not having the choice because they don't have the resources to do so, to like support themselves from a like nutritionally varied diet. And I think a lot of it has to do with like food availability, how delicious like ultra processed food is and how convenient ultra processed food is compared to like knowing how to cook or caring about how to cook or what's convenient, how much time someone has to like prepare those foods. And if you think you're like, oh, I have this signal that I'm hungry, I can eat whatever it is. And now that signal's gone. So like, I'm pretty much good to go. And I think just good nutrition it's just boring. It's not like, we see so much, just like you said, a lot of that misinformation is like these wild ideas that then are like, hey, that sounds really cool. Like, I want to be a part of that. When it's really like, well, good nutrition is just like, it's, in my opinion, it's like, it's not that hard. It's just boring. And you just have to be happy with like having it being sort of regular, like all the time.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny you say that, especially about the Domino's pizza, because before we had our conversation today, I ate a huge burrito and literally it was like, I have to lay down for a few minutes. I was like so tired immediately. I'm like, I ate too much. I'm tired. I got to take a little nap. And I passed out for about 10 minutes before we talked. And as soon as you said the Domino's pizza thing, I was like, It's interesting you're saying this around nutrition though, because like, I'm like, I love running, cycling. Like I'm a relatively active person, but I'll go through these wild phases of inactivity where my diet will tank out hard. And then like, I'm kind of chronically will like shoot up in weight. And then like once a year, I'll shoot up in weight quite a bit. And then by the end of the year, I'll like shoot right back down. And it's like a real predictable pattern for me, but so much of it is tied to eating and how I eat. And once I stop exercising a ton, it's like I give myself like permission on some weird level just to eat every single thing that I know is bad. Where instead, if I wasn't exercising, because I've got a bit of a bum knee right now, if I didn't exercise, I could just be like, well, why don't I get ahead of the game and not eat like total trash? And I'll just take care of my knee and relax a little bit. But there seems to be something attached to like the permission people give themselves to eat poorly, even though they know better, very much like smoking.
Yeah. And I mean, that's hard, man. I mean, that goes into like, there's some psychological thing that people deal with on various levels. Right. And yeah, I mean, there is that sort of permission. Mm-hmm. And then that permission then can become, I'm trying to think of like the right word for it, but like, you know, it can develop beyond this sort of like seasonal thing to this like habitual thing. And that starts to get into a realm that like, that one, I don't know enough about when it comes to like psychology and like relationships with food. That is like something that certainly matters. It absolutely matters. It's like I deal with performance. And so it's like when there's that type of challenge around, like, I'm not sure like what my motivation is for doing this type of thing, you know, around food. It's like, look, I don't know either. And so you need to go talk to someone who has a better idea, because I can tell you what to eat, when to eat, and how much to eat. But if there's something in your like going on that says like, I would rather do this and I'd rather do that, it's like, that's up to you. And I wish you the best to sort out what's going on. But I think it's like, it's tricky, man. It's like, it's just a hard, I mean, and it's something about nutrition just in general is that it's like when you approach nutrition with someone, you're not just talking about fuel, and you're not just talking about sports or performance. You're talking about someone's like culture, someone's like childhood habits, someone's like relationship with whether it's like their spouse or their family and things like that. So it's not just like this, like, you know, as I said, maybe just like a couple minutes ago, it's like nutrition's rather simple. I mean, it's not really like, there's a lot of emotion tied up into it. But I just deal with the very practical side of like, if you want this outcome, this is what to do. And if there's some emotional ties to it, like, I'm not that person to talk about that with.
Well, man, that's cool though that you know that boundary. So first of all, thank you for saying that, because that's like, when you said it was simple, I was like, man, but it's not simple. Like it is practically totally simple. Like there's a code that you can follow basically. But then there's all of the complexities, like, you know, emotions and feelings and self-image and, you know, societal standards and friends and all the stuff that we could talk about. And you covered it well. But it's also good to know what playground you play in. Like, you know, like, I can help you do this. This is the thing that I can help you do. If you want to do that and you want to address that, then maybe I can make a referral to you, which in my business, I do quite a bit of referrals because there's a lot of stuff that we don't do as a company. But let me hit on something though that I think it opens up the door for. So how is leadership, if we think about leadership, because I view your role, and I'm not sure if you'd say this about yourself, I view what you do as leadership, like you're leading people to get to their outcomes. How much of that is tied to your ability to bring other people along for the journey?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the point, I think it's very important to, and I may have mentioned this earlier, but it's like, you have to meet someone where they are, because it's their journey. It's not my journey. Like, I'm there with them, but it's them that are moving along their own path. And so to lead someone is to say, okay, this is where you are. And so based on where you are, these are the types of strategies or approaches we can take to then get you to where you want to be down the road in 1 month's time, 2 months' time, 3 months' time, 1 year's time. And it's, I think, being flexible in my approach of what's appropriate when and in what sort of dose of information to give, that then allows someone to sort of have that like bit of their own realizations, their own discoveries on like, oh, this is now I've moved along the path and I'm like at a further point than I was maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, I really like what you said. It's like, what dose of information do I give someone? So in my field, like I have to always kind of like hedge my bets about how much feedback I give someone, how direct it is, like how gentle do I play, how direct am I, how much like of like general observations do I bring into the conversation versus what I'm directly seeing from them. And I don't always get it right. Like I just had a client like hit me up the other day. It was like, hey, that thing you told me, like, I can't stop thinking about it. It really bothered me. Can we talk about it? And I was like, yeah, totally. And I was like, damn it. Like, I probably was too direct there. I knew I should have stepped a little bit softer. And that's just part of the process of being a coach, is like figuring out how it works, how to get different people to a similar goal in a way that matters. What have you learned about the times where you've kind of where you misstepped? Like, what are the things that you've learned about yourself, about the process, how to get better?
Yeah, I think patience is very important. Not just from, and like understanding that, like, yeah, I mentioned this. Okay, well, nutrition's simple. Mm-hmm. However, how we as humans behave is not simple, right? And so, you can have the best laid plan, but then it just doesn't go to plan at all. And so then it's just, okay, how do we recalibrate? How do we kind of start over? I think the thing that I think has changed over the course of my career so far is that I think in the beginning, it was like this big effort to like demonstrate to a client or an athlete like how smart I am, mm-hmm. and use like complex words and like pathways in the body of like, well, let's upregulate this, protein in like your mitochondria, and let's like, do this and that and the other. And they're just like, I don't know what that is. I don't care if that's going to be beneficial to me. Right. What are you talking about? And that even goes like to another step of like, I spend so much time talking proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Mm-hmm. Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Mm-hmm. But if we laid out a plate of food for people, could people truly identify this is protein, this is carbs, this is fat? Mm-hmm. And do we even understand the energy density and the energy differences around those that like, so you like stop trying to like prove or like, like, hey, put myself on a pedestal of like, I know this, 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 and this. And it's like more like, what do you know and where are you right now? And I don't need to teach you what I know. I need to help coach you to get what you want to know, so then you can be where you want to be. Oh, yeah. Rather than trying to like teach everyone else, give everyone like a lecture on carbohydrate metabolism.
Dude, that's awesome. I love what you just said there. It's like super powerful. And it goes to something that I've noticed about your story. It sounds like you've had like a lot of great mentors in your life. Like I even think of that person you emailed and you emailed a few years later. Like it's cool that someone was willing to tell you how to do that. So what's the role that mentorship has played in your life and in your career?
It's been huge. And I think I feel so lucky and fortunate to have people like that. So that woman was Stacy Sims. She was a nutritionist here in the States. She's now a lecturer in New Zealand. She like giving me not only the time of day when I was a cyclist and got the opportunity to work with her as like the first sports nutritionist that I got to work with, but then still be able to, email her like I said, like 5 years later and still have that relationship. But it was because of like her willingness to give me the time of day was incredible. And then again, was like part of that journey for me to become where I am right now. Same thing, like my first job at the exercise physiology lab, Tim Fleming at Endurance Performance Training Center, like he's like, oh, I could use some extra help, like running some of the exercise tests using a metabolic cart, which I had no idea how to use at all, but helped get me into this like world and opened a total door for me. And I think the thing that I have based on those experiences is something that I always then keep in the back of my head when I've had the opportunity to work with like nutrition interns and have people to try to just like pay it back because of the opportunities that I feel like I was given from people who didn't have to help me. And they did. It's like, okay, well, now how can I help this person who's now maybe where I was, 8 years ago. And now they're just trying to like get their first opportunity. So what can I do then to help them get that opportunity? I think that's how mentorship has sort of just being that guide of like, I don't know. I'm thinking I'm getting like a little lost here, but it's just like, I just feel like I've been given really great opportunities from people who didn't have to give me those opportunities. And that's something that I try to do now, although I feel like I have to give people opportunities because I was given opportunities.
All right, let's go back to punk for a second. What do you think that you took from your experience in punk and hardcore that's helped in your career?
Definitely the do-it-yourself attitude. It's like, well, why can't I do this? Right? Like, it's funny. It's like starting your business was like coming up with like your band's name, right? And then your logo, and you're like, oh, like trying to think about, like how does this name sound? How does that name sound? And then like you develop your aesthetic as a band, right? And then you try to like develop your aesthetic as a consultancy, right? So that's sort of, I think but basically like, yeah, okay, like I'll do it. Like, that's fine. I can do this. Because those sorts of lessons that you learn from punk and hardcore, you take those with you I think for like the rest of your life. Right. I mean, especially at the time of my life when that was going on, it was early teenage years, sort of up through like maybe early 20s, where I was like more actively involved in hardcore. Still listen to hardcore like every single day. But I think that's how it sort of helped in my career of like, you just keep going because maybe you have a bad show, maybe like your band breaks down in South Dakota and you're stuck there like for 4 days on your first tour and it's terrible. But hey, then you catch up, and I think we played with you guys in Allegiance in Detroit because of that.
Yeah, in Detroit. That's right.
Yeah. So it's like, I think just like the perseverance to like quote a Hatebreed album.
Well, which should be quoted all the time. I think that record's 20 years old now.
I think so too, which I cannot believe.
I can't believe it.
I was just listening to that like yesterday.
Yeah, as you should. Well, speaking of someone just doing it, I want to give a shout out to Patrick, who's sitting across the computer from me. During the pandemic, Patrick just decided he was going to do a solo record and taught himself how to like do all of this stuff that he didn't know how to do before, including recording and video editing, and you learn new instruments and everything too, right? Like, although we're talking about career stuff, I just think it's like that DIY attitude of punk rock where it's like, well, yeah, why wouldn't I do that? Like, that idea opens up doors that would have stayed firmly shut. But once you try the door, you realize it's like, it's not shut because there's someone on the other side or because it's locked. It's just shut because I haven't tried to open it yet. And it's a cool thing to bring forward within your life. But there's a flip side to that coin. Is there anything from punk and hardcore that you think has hampered or impacted you negatively in your professional career?
I don't know. I think when I don't know, that's a good question.
I'm full of them, man.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think the thing that was helpful for me, I don't know if it's like, no, I don't think it's negative. I think it's, I mean, when Lights Out started and then like we were playing shows, man, I wasn't intentionally, but I think I was just like really full of myself and kind of like a jerk, like sometimes. And then I remember having someone who was older, who I really respect and still respect, was like, dude, like you got a bad attitude. And I was like, I do? Like, I don't want to have a bad attitude. Like, I thought like I was just having like fun and a good time, you know? And he's like, oh man, like you're a dick. And I was like, what? Like, I couldn't believe, so like knocked me down a few levels, you know? And I guess what I just take from that is like, I don't know where I'm going with this actually.
Well, you know what, man? Mentorship, right? That's someone like doing you a solid and taking you aside and being like, hey, get a hold of yourself.
Yeah. And I still think about that. I mean, that was like probably like over 20 years ago now at this point, but it's like, and I think that is what has the benefit of that was like, just like maintain, like stay humble, stay modest. Don't shout to the world what you're about all the time. Cause most of the time people don't care. That was sort of the thing that I think kind of got from that. So I think trying to just keep your head down and just stay focused rather than be like, look at me.
Yeah. No, and I think actually what you just said there, I think if there's one thing I've heard consistently from people when I ask them this question or they came from the scene is like, you know, I kind of entered into like the business world or the professional world being a little bit like, hey, look at me, or like, here's my idea, or here's my opinion on everything. Because we grew up in punk where it's like, you're supposed to like get up on stage or you're supposed to be in the action somehow. And like, it kind of can propel you to play maybe a little bit too hands-on and then most people are like, I had to learn how to kind of stay in my lane, be focused, like bring where I could bring value. But when I knew how to do it, bring it harder than anyone else.
Yeah. And I think that's like that. I mean, I think that's a great point. And I think it's true because not everybody wants to hear your opinion about something that you don't have like a lot of say in, or, you know, like, it's like, you know, I don't know if we should really do it that way. It's like, nobody asked you. And, you know, like not to like, it's good to get ideas from people who are outside of maybe like the, you know, like outside of the bubble. Right. But it's like, but there's a time and a place for that. And yeah, just like you said, like, yeah, be on stage where you're like, hey, I got the mic. So like everyone's going to listen, to be like, you show up in a more like a different environment and you're like, there's no mic. Just like stay focused on what you're there to do, and then contribute at the appropriate time.
Totally, man. I will never forget being a young therapist and full of just like opinions about everything. It's like, we should do this, we should do that. And I had one boss who just went in like nicely, but was like, yeah, you totally know what you're talking about. And like dismantled my thinking. So like as if you were taking apart a model, like was like, no. And at the end I was just like, I don't know what I'm talking about. But like, it was also done in a respectful way. what I learned from punk and hardcore. Like, I love what you just said. It's like you go from being on stage with a microphone, everyone's like, and they're waiting to clap for anything you say. They're like, yeah, yeah. And then versus there's no microphone. Nobody wants to hear you talk about it, and they're not going to clap. They're going to be like, God, shut up. Like, just talk what you're talking about. All right. So as we're getting close to the close here, man, I got a couple questions. What can you tell us about your consultancy?
Well, let's see. I work with athletes, again, who are like actively involved in training. And it's a whole mix of really just individualizing their own nutrition strategy. So just a lot of like what we talked about, like what's their goals, where are they at, and what do they want to achieve? And what is their trying to figure out, like, why do you even want to work with a sports nutritionist? And what are you hoping to get out of that experience? So you try to, again, meet someone where they are and then try to provide that service and that coaching and that knowledge. And that's, officially started it back in, I think it was like April of 2021, just to, expand on the types of sports and the types of athletes that I was working with.
Okay. And if someone wanted to work with you, where would they find you?
Yeah. I'm at fuellabsports.com. Is the app.
And is there anything else, anywhere else that people can look you up, follow you, like get involved with the things that you're doing?
I'm on Twitter. I don't post that often, but I like a lot of stuff on Twitter. So if you look in my likes section of there, so Twitter is just at Connor Spencer, just my name, and that's pretty much it. I have an Instagram account, but I've pretty much sworn myself off of it. It's not for me at this time in my life. So I'm not really on there, even though I do have a profile. All
right. So we'll drop some links when we're putting up the episode, but I'm going to end with 3 tough questions, man. I hope you are ready.
Okay. All right, let's go.
Okay. Number 1 question, and this is brutal. I'm not going to hold you to it. 3 most iconic, most important punk or hardcore records from the Bay Area ever.
Okay. Oh man.
Any era, any style.
Okay. Oh geez. Okay. First one that comes to mind is going to be Nerve Agent Self-Titled.
Okay.
Because that was a big shift where punk and hardcore stopped being something that I observed to something where then I started to feel like I was actually like part of a community.
Oh yeah.
So like the way, like, again, I was like a 14-year-old kid, and the way that like Eric treated me was like, this is great. So like that's so Nerve Agents Self-Titled is definitely one of them. Oh geez.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry I've done this to you.
There's just like,
I love that your head is in your hands right now. And I just want to tell you, there's 2 people sitting across from me. Like Patrick is writing down, he wrote something down and held it up to me. And these 2 are arguing behind the screen right now about what your answer should be. I just gotta tell you, all bands are valid here. This is what the most iconic, man, for you. Get out of here. You get out of here too. We don't need you either. All right, we got one. And by the way, another guest last week named the exact same record.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Dude, well, I'm like drawing like a total blank here.
Don't worry, we're going to edit out all of this, or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll make it even longer.
I mean, again, I'm thinking like, I think a lot about the bands that hadn't like. I think about the bands that had an impact on me the most. And the things that like it's different in terms, I guess, like iconic is something that I think was personal. Right. So I'm going to go with Some Still Believe too. Some Still Believe, like, The demo was great. And then that 7-inch that like, I think was released on Martyr Records, like after they broke up, was like still like so good. Like when like Matt's voice like changed like slightly and it got like a little bit like rougher.
Yeah.
Like that is like, yeah. So some still believe, and also it's for a similar reason as to why I like chose Nerve Agents, because some still believe then was like a couple of years later when then like it was like meeting all of those dudes then was like even like I was like deeper into the like punk and hardcore community.
And shout out to Dwayne.
Big shout out to Dwayne, like 100%. Yeah. And then, okay. Then the third one, then again, for like the reason of like being young and being like welcomed into a scene has got to be All Bets Off.
Hell yeah. Wow. Good one. Okay, good.
And Sammy and RIP. And just like, I mean, that dude was like, I was like, just like this 7th grade, like little shit. And he was just like, he's like, come to the show, like do this, like, and like really was like pushing to, again, not be that observer, but to get involved.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, there we go. Nerve Agents, some still believe, All Bets Off.
Okay, awesome. Spencer, your job here is to edit out all that silence or increase the silence and then put like that Jeopardy sound behind it. Okay.
Okay, but what was on the paper? What should have been my answers?
Patrick was like heavily looking. He was pointing with like a grim look, saying with the DK symbol.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's huge. That is huge.
Kennedy's was the answer. All right, you ready for question number 2?
Yeah, ready for question 2.
Okay. What's the biggest misconception? What's the biggest misconception about what you do?
I think the biggest misconception about what I do, 2 things. One, that I'm the food police. I'm the guy that says no all the time. So no, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. And then the other misconception is that sports nutrition is just about pills and powders, because whenever you're at the mall or something, it's like that's, you walk into a supplement store and it's something sports nutrition.
Yeah. All right. Last question. And this is a hard one. And I know there's no easy way to this one, but it's one that I think you're well able to take a shot at. Nutrition, like eating all this stuff, it's like complex, like we talked about, but it's also like crazy easy in other ways. For people who are listening to this, and then there's certainly going to be some of them who are like, damn, I don't know how to like eat better. What is like 1, 2, or 3 things that you could simply say to help people out to be like, this is just a good starting point?
Yeah. Okay. There should be some piece of protein on your plate at every single meal, especially breakfast, because we oftentimes see it neglected at breakfast. So that can be, when we talk about protein, we're talking about what probably goes to people's minds at first is going to be like some type of animal-based protein. So it could be an animal-based protein. It could be a plant-based protein. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be some form of protein. Okay. That needs to be at breakfast, needs to be at lunch, needs to be at dinner. Additionally, every meal, or I'm going to say 99% of the time, paired with that protein should be some type of fruit or vegetable. And then your grain-based carbohydrates. So think about your breads, your rices, your pastas. Those can absolutely still be incorporated into the diet. But think about increasing the amount that they feature on your plate with the more activity that you do throughout the day. So if you are not extremely active, then you probably need less of those grain-based carbohydrates. If you are very active, you likely need more. So think about building your plate around proteins and fruits and vegetables, and then sprinkle in those carbs around your activity. That's like the simplest way to put it.
Dude, but that's awesome. I also says that the giant burritos we ate, we're off to the races for today. Yeah. All right. Get out of here. Anything that you want to add in before we close off?
No, I just want to say thanks a lot for having me. It's great to see you and talk with you. That change record is sick.
Thanks.
So like, I really, really like it. It's just like, yeah, there's a lot of hits on there. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Heck yeah. Everyone, something I want to say as I'm closing off, you know, people when they're young, and then you get to, sometimes you lose touch, people change, people grow. I think like something I'd always encourage people to do is like, as you get a little bit older, like really try and see what people actually do. If someone that is just like a face in the crowd, or even someone that you well, but you don't really know what they do, it's just kind of maybe nice just to reach out and understand what people's worlds are like. Connor, when you shared with me what you did, I was like, I got to have you on the show, man. Like, that's so cool. And it's just been cool to see you develop and become the person that you are. So thank you so much for being on here, and just thanks for being in my life, man. I really appreciate you. Yeah, thanks, man. You too. I say the exact same. Okay, awesome. All right, everyone, we'll see you in the outro. And Spencer, drop the beat. One step.